The internet didn't just react, it exploded into pure chaos. Because what just surfaced about Traci Braxton's family has people questioning everything they thought they knew about loyalty, grief, and betrayal. This isn't just drama. This is a full-blown emotional detonation. And at the center of it all, a revelation so shocking, so uncomfortable, that fans are calling it the darkest chapter in Braxton family history. Because Kevin Surratt Jr. has allegedly stepped forward, not quietly, not subtly, but with statements that have ripped open wounds the family tried to keep sealed forever. And who is at the center of these claims? Towanda Braxton. Yes, that Towanda. Because according to what's now circulating across blogs, private chats, and insider circles, Kevin Jr. didn't just hint at tension, he allegedly exposed something far deeper. Something involving his own father, Kevin Surratt. A connection. A relationship. A secret that was never meant to be spoken out loud. And when that detail dropped, everything changed. Fans immediately started connecting dots from years ago. Old arguments. Awkward scenes. The way Traci Braxton used to call certain behavior out on camera, labeling it shady, calling someone a snake, warning people without ever fully explaining why. Now, those warnings are hitting differently. Because what once sounded like sibling shade now feels like coded truth. And the timing. It couldn't be more explosive. Because this didn't come out during a calm moment. This came out during an already emotional father-son sit-down that was supposed to be about healing, about legacy, about honoring Traci. But instead, it turned into something else entirely. Tension filled the room. Voices tightened. Energy shifted. And according to viewers, you could literally see the discomfort the moment certain topics started getting too close to the truth. Because when Kevin Jr. pushed back against his father, it didn't feel natural. It felt influenced. Coached. Like someone had been whispering in his ear long before the cameras started rolling. And that's where things get even more intense. Because insiders are now claiming that this isn't just about one revelation. This is about years of manipulation, quiet control, and relationships that weren't what they seemed behind closed doors. And if even half of what's being whispered is true, then the Braxton family isn't just dealing with drama. They are dealing with a truth that could change everything. Because now the question isn't just what happened. It's how long it's been happening. And who knew about it. And just when people thought this couldn't get any more explosive, a supposed message leak began circulating. Unconfirmed. Unverified. But chilling. Because in that message, there's a line that has everyone asking the same question. What if Traci wasn't just calling things out? What if she already knew? The moment that alleged message started circulating, the entire narrative flipped from emotional to deeply unsettling. Because now people weren't just reacting to what Kevin Surratt Jr. said in that tense, uncomfortable sit-down. They were re-examining everything. Every look. Every argument. Every moment where Traci Braxton seemed frustrated, dismissed, or pushed aside. And suddenly, those moments didn't feel random anymore. They felt intentional. Because according to insiders, that father-son conversation between Kevin Jr. and Kevin Surratt was never supposed to go the way it did. It was supposed to be healing. Reflective. A chance to rebuild something broken after loss. But instead, it turned into a battlefield. Because from the very first exchange, the tension was thick. Kevin Sr. came in calm, measured, almost emotional, speaking about legacy, about honoring Traci, about keeping her memory alive. His tone carried weight, like a man who had been holding things in for far too long. But Kevin Jr. He came in guarded. Sharp. Defensive in a way that immediately raised eyebrows. And viewers noticed it instantly. Because every time Kevin Sr. tried to open a door, Kevin Jr. slammed it shut. Every attempt at connection was met with resistance. Every emotional moment was redirected, challenged, or cut off entirely. And it didn't feel like grief. It felt like conflict. Like something deeper was sitting underneath that conversation, something unspoken, something unresolved. And then came the moment that changed everything. When Kevin Sr. mentioned how close Traci was to certain people in the family, and how she felt like someone had been pushed out. The energy shifted instantly. Kevin Jr. shut it down. Hard. He didn't just disagree, he reacted. Defensively. Almost protectively. And that reaction, it didn't go unnoticed. Because people started asking, why did that hit such a nerve? Why did a simple statement about Traci's feelings trigger such an intense response? And that's when the whispers started getting louder. Because according to so-called insiders, that wasn't just a disagreement. That was a pressure point. A moment that got dangerously close to something Kevin Jr. didn't want discussed publicly. And the more the conversation continued, the more uncomfortable it became. Because Kevin Sr. wasn't just speaking as a father. He was speaking as someone who had been inside that family for nearly 3 decades. Someone who had seen things, heard things, lived things. And when he said he knew what was going on multiple levels, it didn't sound like speculation. It sounded like experience. But every time he got close to explaining those levels, he stopped, pulled back, almost like he knew exactly how far he could go, and what would happen if he went further. That hesitation, it spoke volumes. Because it suggested one thing very clearly. There are things that still haven't been said. Things that even now are being held back. Meanwhile, Kevin Jr.'s demeanor only intensified. Viewers described it as unnatural. Not just defensive, but influenced. Like someone had already shaped his perspective before he ever sat down in that chair. And that's where Towanda Braxton's name started creeping into the conversation again. Because according to ongoing rumors, Towanda has allegedly had a strong influence over how Kevin Jr. sees his father. And if that's true, then what we were watching wasn't just a conversation. It was the result of years of behind-the-scenes tension finally surfacing in real time. And then came another explosive moment. The next of kin argument. Something that should have been simple, clear, legal. But instead, it turned into a full-blown conflict. When Kevin Sr. referred to himself as Traci's next of kin, Kevin Jr. immediately pushed back, insisting it should have been the children. But here's the thing. Legally, Kevin Sr. was right. And yet, Kevin Jr. stood firm in his belief. Which raised an even bigger question. Where did that idea come from? Because it didn't sound like confusion. It sounded like something he had been told. Repeated. Believed. And that moment, it didn't just expose a misunderstanding. It exposed a disconnect. A divide between father and son that felt too deep to be explained by grief alone. Because this wasn't just about definitions. This was about trust. About authority. About who had the right to speak for Traci, and who didn't. And as the conversation unfolded, one thing became painfully clear. This family isn't just fractured. It's divided into sides. And Kevin Jr. He didn't seem like he was standing in the middle. He seemed like he had already chosen. Meanwhile, viewers couldn't ignore another uncomfortable truth. Neither Kevin Sr. nor Kevin Jr. have been fully embraced in the public narrative surrounding Traci's legacy. They are not central figures in the show. They are not consistently included in the storytelling. And that absence, it's raising serious questions. Because if Traci was truly the glue of the family, then why are the people closest to her being pushed to the edges? Why does it feel like her story is being told without the voices that knew her best? And that's where things get even more intense. Because Kevin Sr. subtly hinted at something that stopped people in their tracks. He suggested that certain people might not want him around because he knows too much. That line, it changed everything. Because suddenly, this isn't just about conflict. It's about control. About who gets to tell the story. And who gets silenced. And just when it felt like the tension couldn't get any worse, the conversation ended. Abruptly. Without resolution. Without closure. Leaving behind more questions than answers. But the biggest question of all. It's the one nobody can stop asking now. If Kevin Sr. knows more than he's saying, and Kevin Jr. is reacting to something deeper than what we are seeing, then what exactly is being hidden? And more importantly, how far does it go? The silence after that interview didn't calm anything down, it made everything louder. Because once the cameras stopped rolling, the internet picked up where the conversation left off, and turned it into a full-blown investigation. Clips were replayed in slow motion. Comments were dissected word for word. And people started noticing things that felt impossible to ignore. Especially when it came to Kevin Surratt Jr.'s behavior. Because the more viewers rewatched that sit-down, the more one question kept coming up. Why did he seem so determined to shut his father down? Not disagree. Not debate. Shut him down. Every time Kevin Surratt got close to explaining something deeper, Kevin Jr. interrupted, redirected, deflected. And it didn't feel emotional. It felt strategic. Like certain topics were off limits. Like certain truths were not allowed to be said out loud. And that's when the second wave of leaks started hitting. Private messages. Alleged voice notes. Fragments of conversations that were never meant for the public. Unverified, yes, but detailed enough to keep the fire burning. One message in particular had people completely shaken. Because it allegedly referenced communication between Towanda Braxton and Kevin Jr. before the interview even happened. And according to what's being circulated, it wasn't just casual conversation. It was guidance. Advice. What some are calling direction. Phrases like, "Don't let him twist things," and "stick to what we talked about" allegedly appeared in those exchanges. Again, nothing confirmed. But the timing. The tone. It lined up just enough to make people uncomfortable. Because if those messages are even partially real, then that interview wasn't just a father trying to reconnect with his son. It was a controlled narrative playing out in real time. And suddenly, Kevin Jr.'s reactions started making sense in a completely different way. Not as grief. Not as confusion. But as someone holding onto a version of events that had already been shaped for him. Meanwhile, Kevin Surratt remained consistent. Calm. Measured. Almost too careful. Like a man who knows exactly how much he can say, and exactly what happens if he says too much. And that restraint, it only made people more curious. Because when someone with decades of history chooses silence over detail, it's usually not because there's nothing to say. It's because there's too much. And that's when another layer of this story started surfacing. The absence. The glaring, uncomfortable absence of Kevin Sr. and Kevin Jr. from the Braxton family spotlight. Because fans started asking questions that nobody could ignore anymore. Why isn't Kevin Jr. a central voice in honoring his mother's legacy? Why does it feel like he's been pushed to the side instead of embraced? Why does Kevin Sr., a man who was married to Traci Braxton for decades, seem almost erased from the narrative? And the more people asked those questions, the more unsettling the answers started to feel. Because according to insiders, there's been tension behind the scenes for years. Not loud, not public, but consistent. A quiet divide that allegedly grew stronger over time. And at the center of that divide, control. Control over the story. Control over Traci's legacy. Control over who gets to speak and who doesn't. And then came the detail that sent everything spiraling again. The funeral. Because one of the most shocking claims resurfacing right now is that not everyone from the family attended. And the reason? Still unclear. Still debated. Still surrounded by speculation that ranges from disagreement to something far more personal. And that absence. It's being looked at differently now. Not as coincidence, but as a clue. Because when a family fractures during a moment like that, it's rarely about one disagreement. It's about something deeper. Something unresolved. Something that doesn't get fixed overnight. Meanwhile, online reactions reached a breaking point. Fans began choosing sides more aggressively. Some defending Towanda Braxton, saying she's being unfairly targeted, dragged into rumors without proof. Others standing behind Kevin Sr., arguing that his calm demeanor speaks louder than any denial ever could. And then there are those watching Kevin Jr. Not with judgment, but with concern. Because the more this unfolds, the more he looks like someone caught in the middle of something bigger than himself. Pulled in different directions. Trying to hold onto what he believes, while being surrounded by voices telling him different versions of the same story. And that's what makes this so heavy. Because underneath the drama, underneath the rumors, there's a real family. A real loss. And real relationships that may never recover from what's happening right now. But just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get any more intense, another twist dropped. A claim that changes everything, again. According to multiple sources now saying the same thing. There may be footage. Not from the show. Not from interviews. But private. Unreleased. Footage that allegedly captures moments between key people in this story that were never meant to be seen publicly. And if that footage exists, if it ever comes out, it won't just add to the narrative. It could rewrite it completely. Because now the question isn't just what was said. It's what was recorded. And who has it? The moment whispers about that alleged footage started spreading, the entire situation crossed a line no one could ignore. Because rumors are one thing. Messages can be denied. Audio can be questioned. But footage changes everything. And according to multiple sources now echoing the same claim, what's allegedly on that unreleased video isn't just emotional, it's explosive. Because if true, it doesn't just show tension. It shows interaction. Behavior. Moments that, taken out of the shadows and into the light, could completely reshape how people see Towanda Braxton and Kevin Surratt. And that possibility, it has everyone on edge. Because behind the scenes, insiders claim conversations have shifted from ignore the noise to contain the damage. Which tells you everything you need to know. Meanwhile, public opinion is no longer just divided. It's fractured. Some are doubling down, saying this is all speculation spiraling out of control, that no one should be condemned without hard proof. Others are pointing at the patterns. The tension. The awkward dynamics that suddenly make more sense in hindsight. And then there are those who have stopped choosing sides entirely, because they are waiting. Waiting to see if that footage actually surfaces. Because if it does, there will be no room left for interpretation. And Tamer's earlier warnings, Traci's past frustrations, Kevin Sr.'s restraint. all of it will be looked at differently. But here's where the emotional weight hits hardest. Because lost in all of this chaos is Kevin Surratt Jr. And the more this story unfolds, the clearer it becomes that he's not just a voice in this situation. He's at the center of it. A son navigating grief. A son caught between narratives. A son trying to protect what he believes is right, while being surrounded by conflicting truths that don't fully align. And that tension, it's starting to show. Because in recent clips and appearances, viewers are noticing a shift. Less certainty. More hesitation. Moments where he pauses before responding, like he's weighing not just what he thinks, but what he's been told. And that's where the story becomes something deeper than drama. Because now people aren't just asking what happened between the adults involved. They are asking what impact this is having on him. What it means to grow up inside a situation where truth feels fluid. Where loyalty is complicated. Where every statement carries weight. Meanwhile, Kevin Surratt remains consistent. Still calm. Still measured. Still refusing to cross a line that others seem ready to step over. And that silence, it's starting to feel intentional. Because sometimes, saying less isn't weakness. It's protection. Protection of himself. Protection of his son. Or maybe, protection of something bigger that hasn't fully come to light yet. And then there's Towanda. Still quiet. Still not addressing the storm directly. And at this point, that silence is no longer neutral. It's strategic. Because every moment she doesn't respond gives the situation more room to grow, but also more room to collapse if the wrong thing is said. It's a high-stakes waiting game. And everyone knows it. But just when it felt like things had reached their peak, another layer surfaced. A claim, again unverified, but spreading fast enough to keep the tension alive. That there are people within the extended circle who know the truth. Not pieces of it. Not versions of it. The full story. And they've stayed quiet. Until now. Because according to those whispers, there's pressure building. Pressure for someone to speak. Pressure for someone to confirm or deny what's been circulating. Pressure that doesn't just affect reputations, but relationships. And once that pressure breaks, there's no controlling what comes out next. Because at the core of this entire situation is something no one can escape. Truth. Whether it's messy, whether it's complicated, whether it hurts, it has a way of surfacing. And when it does, it doesn't ask permission. So now everything hangs in the balance. Will that footage surface? Will someone step forward? Will the silence finally break? Or will this remain a storm of speculation that never fully settles? One thing is certain. This story isn't over. Not even close. Because when too many questions are left unanswered, they don't disappear. They build. And right now, they are building towards something that could change everything. And here's the part you cannot ignore. Because what's unfolding right now isn't just another headline, it's a story that is still moving, still shifting, and still hiding pieces we haven't even seen yet. Every hour, something new leaks. Every day, another perspective surfaces. And the truth, it's not sitting still. So if you think you've heard everything, you haven't. If you think this drama has peaked, it hasn't. Because the moment that footage drops, the moment someone finally breaks their silence, the moment one key voice steps forward, everything you thought you knew could flip instantly. That's why you need to stay locked in right here. Hit like right now if you felt the intensity of this story. Drop your thoughts in the comments because this situation is far from black and white, and your perspective matters more than ever. And most importantly, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because when the next piece of this puzzle surfaces, and it will, you do not want to be the one hearing about it late. You don't want to miss the receipts. You don't want to miss the reactions. You don't want to miss the moment this entire narrative either collapses or explodes. Stay ready. Stay watching. Because this story, it's not ending. It's just getting started.